All right, welcome back to Day to Day. This is Greg Michelson, and I'm here with Todd Persen, a new friend actually that I was introduced to a couple of weeks ago. Todd, say hi.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's really great to have you on. In fact, I'm looking forward to getting to know you a bit. Maybe just to get started, you can kind of give us the 60-second sketch of who Todd is.
Yeah, sure. I've been in, the observability space for the last decade or so, probably even back before we called it observability.
I don't even know
Um,
what that means. What is observability?
oh man. Well, so observability is sort of the tooling and systems that let us monitor the things we build, how we deploy them, how we run them. And so it really comes down to we kind of have three core things we talk about in traditional observability: logs, which most people are familiar with; metrics, which are sort of like numerical things that turn into graphs that look good; and then traces, which are we talk about distributed traces, are ways when you have a system that's composed of a bunch of different elements. It's a way for you to look and see how a request flows through all of those different pieces. And if your system's running slow, traces are a way of saying like, oh, it's running slow because this piece is running slow. And so it lets you kind of see charts and visualizations that get into that. And so, my first company, Influx Data, that I started back in 2012, 2013, that focused a lot more on the metrics piece. So we built a time series database. Again, that's like all this data is time oriented. So every piece of data that comes in, whether it's a metric or a log, that's all, got a timestamp on it. It tells you exactly when that thing happened. And so time series databases are really oriented around that kind of data. And they're really efficient at handling this stuff, telling you things like trends and patterns, over time. And that's where those shine. So my first company was doing that. Again, a lot more metrics. I've been doing a lot more stuff with logs recently. But yeah, just that kind of, I can't get away from it. It's just where I am.
So your first job was a company that you started, or
Not
did
my
you work
first
before that?
job. No, my first job was actually tech support for my local ISP when I was in high school. We still had dial-up modems, and people would come in and sign up for their internet service and pay you with a check for
Yeah,
$20 for a month of service. And
good for
um,
my generation.
oh man, it was such it was a good experience, but it's very different now.
Hmm. All right, awesome. But I'm curious about the whole entrepreneurial side of it. Did you jump
Yeah.
right from high school into starting a company? Or
No, so I played with computers a lot as a kid. I got into software development more as just like a tinkering child. Like I wanted to figure out how to build my own stuff, build my own games, like those kinds of things. And so, got into software that way. Ended up going to school for electrical engineering because I was more interested in the hardware side. Wanted to understand like how to microprocessors work, how do you make circuit boards, how do you design all these things, and how does it all work together? And then kind of I enjoyed that. I still find it really fascinating. But when I got out of college in, oh god, 2002, something like that, there it wasn't that wasn't a very portable skill. You had to be in a place with a desk, designing circuit boards or doing whatever, using like really terrible CAD software. Software was just a lot easier. And as I was, young and moving around, it was easier to get back into software. So I spent some time working for a company called Pivotal Labs. Most people may not remember. They were a consulting firm. I don't know if you know what agile software development is. Yeah. So they were one of the big proponents of agile. And so they did a bunch of work early on. Early days of Twitter was one of their customers. So when they had a bunch of engineers that were actually working with Twitter. They had like some contracts with Google working on Android. But anyway, they did a bunch of these engagements where they would just kind of bring engineers and an agile methodology and just help people get software built. And so I got to see that process of going from like idea, rapid development to like something that you could put in a customer's hands or you could get feedback on or get value from. And I really enjoyed that, just like build process. And so I think that kind of pushed me a lot more towards wanting to start a company. And so I'd done that. I'd had a lot of, general software jobs, but that was kind of the thing that really pushed me kind of at the end to start a company.
so I was at Data Robot uh, back in that same time period as you were
But yeah,
starting your first company. The VC market back then was crazy. Like it
yeah,
seemed like it was so easy to raise money back in, 2012, 2013, 2014 timeframe.
yeah. It was, and I think it's interesting to see how it changed. Like I feel like every 3 to 5 years, there's a new cycle, new phase. I mean, right now, I mean, if you're doing something in AI, it's pretty easy to raise money right now because that's just where all the dollars are flowing into. I think we're starting to see a little bit of a contraction there. Some companies that raised money 2 years ago that didn't actually find a product or found a product that now OpenAI or Anthropic has built something better than. We're seeing those companies get swallowed up or shut down. And I think we're going through a wild time right now, and VC money. It always has its ups and downs. But yeah, that was a pretty fun time.
And from your first, what happened with your first company? Did you guys?
So yeah, I stayed there for about 5 years. Kind of had hit the point where I wanted to do something else, and that company's still around. If you look up InfluxDB, that was the database that we built. Still, the most popular time series database on the market. It's that market that we played in, observability kind of broadly has changed a lot. A lot of really big companies in the space now, and so that market has just continued to evolve. But the company's still there. There's a lot of we're generating a lot more data now in observability than we ever have been, and I'm sure that's going to continue to go up. A lot of the trends we're seeing with AI, I think, are going to do nothing but continue to drive growth of those data volumes. So yeah, it's still around, and yeah, just making a dent out there in the observability market.
So I'm curious about I guess the logs. We spend a lot of time at Zerv because we have a development app. So it's basically like an IDE almost
Hmm.
for Python, SQL, R, targeting data scientists, and it's an agentic coding environment. It's a bit different from like your Claude codes or like Cursor or something like that because we also do the infrastructure. So we'll spin up compute and we do hosting and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. But like we use PostHog to capture application event data, which I guess would go under the category of logs. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple different ways to slice it. So I think if you've got certain events and things like that in your application that you want to collect, there are tools that are pretty good at that. Also, there are some products that if you have like specifically an error or like a crash, they're really good at collecting that kind of data, so you can go back and see,
Right.
okay, why did this thing break? Give me the stack trace so I can go through it. But then there's you mentioned infrastructure, but there's like a whole world of just like you've got these complex cloud native deployments. What are all of the pieces of that infrastructure doing? Like how healthy is everything? And then each piece of that stack emits its own logs, and so you can get a pretty big like log volume relatively quickly as you deploy and scale these environments. And I think you know we've it's this like I don't know, continual curse. Like you make it easier to store more data, and people always want more data. And so we've seen logs go from I don't know how much you were doing back in, I don't know, the late 90s with like web servers, like the original Apache web server. You get a little timestamp and a really short explanation of what happened. And they were human readable. They were kind of meant you just like skim through a log file to see what happened. And now we've got these complicated JSON structures with all these like this ID and that ID and this, even when we talked about distributed tracing, like there are different IDs for the request and all the different pieces of it. And so you can now get these relatively complicated JSON payloads that are just one single log line so that you can correlate it with all the other different parts of your system. And so um, that's the place where we see a lot of the growth, is just like all of this stuff going on underneath your application also just generates a tremendous amount of data. And that's just getting, it's getting richer and richer, and it's getting higher and higher volume. And I think that's just going to keep happening.
So and let me ask you, maybe this is in your area of expertise or not, but one of the problems, we're actually doing a hackathon coming up at ODSC where we're challenging, do you know ODSC?
No.
The Open Data Science Conference. It's in
Oh,
Boston.
nice. Okay.
There's one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast every year. This one's the end of April. And it's, I think the 20, 27, 28, 29, whatever. So if you're in Boston, it's a great conference. It's really good. This guy, Seamus McGovern, is the head of ODSC. He does a really good job at it. But the challenge that we are proposing, I think there's a $10,000 prize for that one, actually. It's analyzing that event data for some very specific questions. I can't, it's a hackathon, so I'm not going to tell what you know what I mean. But you have experience with kind of like, how do you take log data or event data, and are there existing tool sets for converting that into like knowledge about what users are doing and how your application is working and what the important parts of your app are and so on? Is that some of what you do there?
Yeah, I mean, we focus primarily on the storage piece because that's like at a certain scale, just storing the data is hard. I mean, LLMs are actually quite good at taking logs from an arbitrary source and trying to figure out what's going on. Especially, a lot of them have been trained on data sets that understand applications and infrastructure. So, it sees an error message in a log line. It's pretty good at figuring out what that means and then, looking around for other context. And so the challenge that I think most of the industry has right now is that, you can do that if you give somebody, like 10,000 log lines, you can just feed that into Claude and it can, make sense of it. If you have like hundreds of millions or billions of log lines, or you have this, massive, amount of data that's like always coming through, that's, generally like bigger, obviously than the context windows, but more data than you can just realistically even feed into an LLM without, spending a fortune. And so
Or
that's the
in the context window?
yeah, exactly. And so that's the trade-off right now, where we see it's they're great with limited data sets. They struggle with doing real-time analysis of these huge data feeds. That's not what they were designed for. But
Is it,
I
do you find people are more focused on like error detection and application health and stuff like that, or about like gleaning information about their whatever process they're running?
Yeah, I think it depends on your focus. Like I think there's plenty of both. Like there are a lot of security use cases that are also very similar to what we see in observability. Like most observability products are focused more on application and infrastructure health, looking for things that might indicate a problem, and so that you can go and work on remediation and page somebody if something breaks, some threshold drops below a certain threshold, go page somebody. Like that's where a lot of observability lives. But then security, it's a lot of the same data sources. We're still looking at logs for a lot of these security use cases, and so for that, people are definitely more focused on what are the behavioral patterns, like what kind of analytics can I run on these these traffic patterns to figure out, like, is this legitimate traffic? Is this somebody trying to breach my infrastructure? And then again, we're pushing into all new territory now because we've got these agentic things that are, previously a lot of these automated things may have been more likely to be malicious, and now we've got a whole lot of totally valid agentic traffic that we're needing to figure out how to deal with, both from a just sheer infrastructure. Like agents could
That's
generate tremendous amounts of traffic.
I hadn't considered that there would be how do I tell the bad bots from the good bots problem.
Yeah, and it's a real challenge. And I think there's a lot of companies that are starting right now in that space. And so I think there's a couple angles to it. One is just, is this traffic I want to allow? If it's an agent just coming in, let's say just scraping prices from my website, maybe I don't want to allow that. But what if it's a customer trying to automate a purchase or something like that? So we're starting to get into the agentic commerce is kind of been coming up a bit. But then how do you, again, how do you disambiguate those? How do you handle authorizing payments? Like there's just a whole bunch of these workflows that are, we've figured them out for people. You click on a form, you put your credit card in, and you go. But agents, because they're operating so quickly, and in a lot of cases without direct oversight, it changes a lot of the way that I think people have to approach these problems.
Are there a lot of agents going around buying stuff?
It's certainly happening. I wouldn't say the average consumer is buying things, with agents, but it's definitely happening, and it's definitely something that I think we're going to see more and more of. Certainly not like huge purchases. And actually, I heard just yesterday somebody was telling me Walmart had done a partnership with OpenAI to do kind of an integrated like chat GPT assisted purchasing, but they actually found that uh it ended up not working out very well because the agents would just go make these like individual purchases. Like it would just go buy one thing and then order that and then go buy another thing, and it's totally missing that human psychology of like, oh, I'm here looking for socks, and then, oh right, I need shampoo also, and there are all these like all the psychological design that we put into shopping carts and e-commerce sites. Like agents don't care. They're like, you told me to go buy socks, I'm just going to go buy socks. Like
Hmm.
done, mission
Well, that's
accomplished.
interesting. Actually, I hadn't even thought about it, but my wife and I are like we're on a bit of a health kick,
Hmm.
and she's exploring this whole like a keto diet, like a low carb diet. And I'm at the grocery store like 2 or 3 times a day because it's like, oh, I need this, oh, I need that. If there was an agent out there and I could say, look, my budget for groceries every week is, X dollars, order it and have it delivered, and also send me the recipes and, what my meal plans are and stuff, I would do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
That'd be
yeah, I
amazing.
mean and it changes. It's kind of like the oh, what was that? Blue something. There was one of those companies that you could like get the meal
Yeah.
kits from.
Yeah.
And then we had that phase, and that's gone. Um, and I feel like it's very similar, except now it can be customized, and you can just say like, here are my health goals. Put together meal plans for me, and like you said, like just order the stuff. Like it could even be your local store through DoorDash or something like that, and just be
Yeah,
like,
exactly. See, the problem with like HelloFresh and whatever that blue one
yeah,
is, there's such a huge markup. It's crazy. Like
yeah,
you end up paying, an outrageous amount of money for food that you could go down to the store for ingredients that you could go down to the store and buy.
yep, yep.
I
Blue Apron. That's what it was called.
Blue Apron. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we did
Um,
HelloFresh for a while, but shoot, I mean, it wouldn't even be that hard to build that agent. But
No, and I
figuring
mean,
out
honestly, I think a lot of this stuff you could probably just do in Claude. I think a lot of the primitives are there that you can even set up like a co-work task or something like that, and just say like once a week, go, build me five or seven nights of randomized meals, uh, get my approval, and then go order the stuff, get it delivered Monday afternoon.
yeah, I
So
mean, even if it just filled the shopping cart
right,
and
yeah,
you still had to click buy.
yep. And it can
Still,
even be one of those like I feel like we're getting off in the weeds, but like find me the stuff that is in stock, and if it's out of stock, pick a reasonable alternative. And there's just a whole bunch of stuff that I think we are just beginning to scratch the surface on where this fits in all these weird like nooks in our life. But yeah, I think the commerce piece is something that we're just getting started on. I think it's gonna be bigger and bigger.
yeah, no, I would want that agent to keep track of what's in my pantry and what's in my fridge and when stuff expires and
Yep.
basically live life for me.
Yeah, and that reminds me of I was talking to my wife yesterday, and she said one of her friends took a picture of their of a closet and just said, "Hey, ChatGPT, like organize this for me. Like tell me how to organize this." And it did a pretty good job. So I mean, yeah, if you can just take a picture of your fridge or take a picture of your pantry, like the models are just going to keep getting better and better. And I mean, at a certain point, these things are just going to be very easy tasks for it to execute at near perfection.
Hmm. Well, I'm inspired. I'm going to build that agent in Zerv this evening.
Do it.
By the end of the weekend, I'm going to have a working grocery store agent.
There you
That's
go.
awesome. I'm pretty pumped about that. Actually, it's exciting. So anything that can save me a trip to the grocery store is a big win.
Yeah,
But I
definitely.
think Walmart even delivers. Actually,
Yeah, yeah. I think there are a lot of grocery stores that have some, whether it's through Instacart or DoorDash, or I think there are lots of delivery options at this point.
Hmm. Exciting. I love that. All right, so back to the topic. Your current company. What's the name of it?
So I work at a company called Hydraulics. So Hydraulics is, we're definitely in the log management space. Our focus, the product that we've built is really a petabyte scale. So, a petabyte is 1,000 terabytes, terabytes 1,000 gigabytes. So pretty large data volume. So petabyte scale, real-time log management platform. And primarily our focus right now is on we have big partnerships with companies in the CDN space, so content delivery networks. So like Akamai, Cloudflare, Fastly, those are kind of the traditional CDNs. So we do a lot of work in that space because
Wait, I don't
There's
actually know much about that.
yeah.
Content deliver what content is being delivered?
So yeah, so and this was
Forgive my ignorance here.
Akamai got their start in the 90s when it was infeasible for a lot of companies to push just websites, web content, images, all that stuff to their customers at scale. And so Akamai kind of pioneered this design where you basically have local data centers, all over the world, and when you request an asset, an image, or whatever, it downloads it from a cache that Akamai keeps for you at the closest region for every person. And so, like, I'm in Seattle. There's data centers in and around Seattle. So if I request something from the internet, from a major company, it's almost certainly coming from like a cached copy. And so CloudFront is another one that Amazon has. So there are tons of companies in this space, but we work a lot with companies that also are in like media and gaming. So when they're streaming a live event, you know, um, Disney or Hulu or whatever, they're not always streaming the full data feed to every single customer. They may be streaming it to a CDN who then is handling regional distribution for each of those. And so this is a big deal for large sporting events like the Super Bowl, the Olympics, stuff like that. And the individual user performance has a big impact on like quality of ads and stuff like that. Like, are those getting delivered well? Are they having a good experience? Because if they're frustrated, they're going to turn it off. And so our product allows CDNs to send us logs for all of these large media e-commerce companies. Stream those logs to us as those events are happening in real time, or as those customers are like purchasing websites, and then we can generate dashboards in real time for the people who are monitoring those services. So like, Super Bowl, for example, there's a team that's just sitting there looking at like, how is my video performance? Are there problems in specific regions? Like, do we, if we ran into a network issue, can we move capacity to a different region? All that stuff is happening in real time.
How do they
And
get paid? Who hires these CDNs?
so, it's the companies that are delivering the media, whatever. So like
Paramount
yeah, like
Plus or whatever.
yeah, so they're gonna have a contract with Akamai, and part of it is like they're offsetting money they would otherwise have to spend on infrastructure or bandwidth.
Hosting.
But then like Akamai and these other companies they run physical data centers all over the world that are designed to handle the scale and capacity and burst up, and that means some media companies have, like Netflix probably has built their own CDN at this point because they have enough money, but other companies, they don't want to have to run 20, 30 global data centers. And it's just easier for them to go through a CDN partner or multiple CDN partners, depending on, like, sometimes they may have different partners in different areas of the world.
Hmm. Got it. Okay. And so the CDNs are capturing logs about what I'm watching, that sort of log?
Yeah, so the CDNs are emitting logs. So like they basically are uh as they're serving data to you, your device is sending data back like, here's my frame rate, here's my latency, like how much lag is there, all these metrics about the quality of your
I'm
experience.
watching Yellowstone and
Yeah.
it's saying, okay, you watched, an ad about fabric softener and your frame rate was this and your bandwidth and content.
Yeah, or if you got like, if you had an issue and it was buffering in the middle of an episode, it's really annoying. The media companies want to know if that's happening, and then they can either figure out, is it something on their end, is it something on your end, is it your particular version of Android or iOS, and so they can address those issues. But then the CDN companies emit those logs as they're getting all that data, and then we hydraulics partner with those CDNs to store that data. So we basically, and for some of these, it can be tens or hundreds of terabytes a day of log data that we store and provide an experience like with dashboards and real time queries that anybody from these media companies can go log in and see. They see the performance, see the average latency. They can drill down by uh, specific version or specific time frame or region, and they can look at that data and react to it.
Gotcha. And you do the storage of those logs.
We do the storage. Yeah, we do the storage, and we provide the dashboard experience that those companies. So essentially, for the CDNs that we partner with, they just serve the data, and they kind of emit the logs or metrics. They emit the telemetry that we then uh, pick up, and then we store and kind of make it all available for their customers.
Gotcha. Now, do you guys store it as just plain text, or are you doing like a vector database or embeddings?
We have all kinds of stuff. It's definitely not plain text. Yeah, plain text would be difficult for a lot of reasons. But yeah, a whole part of I mentioned my first company worked on time series databases. Like effectively, hydraulics is another time series database. But we do a lot of things to look for patterns in the data. We have some types of data we call high cardinality data. So if you have lots of unique values in a particular field, that becomes difficult to index in efficient ways. And so we kind of deploy all the tricks that we can to make this data, efficient to compress, high performance. Like we really do everything we possibly can, and we're constantly looking for ways to improve it, ways to improve query performance, ways to improve compression and efficiency. And so that's our whole job, is to do that part as well as we can and be better than, there are some open source alternatives. Like, I don't know if you've heard of Parquet. Is just it's a way of storing structured data in a kind of a compressed block. And so not too dissimilar from the way we store data. We have these like time-based chunks of data, and we're always compressing them and recompressing them to look for optimizations over time.
Gotcha. And the CDNs are your customers?
I would say the CDNs are our partners. We sort of serve their customers generally.
Netflix is your customer, not Netflix.
Yeah, like a Disney or a Hulu or a Fox. Like those are generally our customers, and a lot of the relationship kind of comes through the CDN. And so it's a nice position for us to be in, because we can take an existing commercial relationship. We can bring tools that make the CDN experience more valuable, like giving them observability and the ability to get more value out of those CDNs. So it's a great partnership, and I think it puts us in a really fun space where we can keep working with some of the biggest media companies in the world and keep building cool technology.
And why would Disney Plus say want to look at those logs? Are they trying to like police the CDNs, or are they looking for, like, I suppose they might be interested in when somebody stops watching a particular show.
I think it's I wouldn't say policing the CDNs is exactly the way I would put it. I would just say there are so many variables in what impacts a viewer's experience. And so the CDNs, obviously, so take Akamai as a good example. We do a lot of work with Akamai. They've got thousands of customers, and all of those thousands of customers have tens, hundreds of millions of end users. And for them, they may not be able to see where a specific issue is coming from. And so when we bring a product like hydraulics, we make it possible for the customer of the CDN to say, I want to look at this specific thing that I really care about, or I want to look and see if there are any things that stand out. And it could be CDN performance. It could just be network problems. It could be their infrastructure performance. It could be, in the event of like some sort of regional outage, they might see, all the customers on the East Coast are having latency problems right now. Maybe Comcast is down or something like that. So there are tons of different ways that data could be valuable. And then, part of it also is, for some of these companies, these logs are also ways that they can get insights into piracy. If people are trying to steal accounts, or have 100 people on the same account, or doing some sort of like IP sharing thing that may be against terms of service. They can get some insights into that data, and they wouldn't be able to do that if they didn't have a place for all those logs to go, so that they could run analytics. And so it covers a pretty broad spectrum of things that they want to see. But at the end of the day, if you don't have those logs stored somewhere and have the ability to query against them, build charts and graphs against them, you miss this big picture of how things are actually performing.
Now, one of the things I think I would be thinking about, and I'm completely new to the space here, so I'm, shooting from the hip here, but I imagine it's not cheap to capture and store and host all that data. So the savings, the ROI on it has to be pretty big
Yeah.
for the content providers. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's not cheap. We do a lot. A lot of the work that we do is making it as cheap as possible. Um, and I think that's kind of one of our special skills that we bring to this problem space, is that we've been working on this for a long time. But yeah, you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, it is an ROI problem. But generally these are the key businesses of the customers that we're looking at. Getting content from Disney Plus or Hulu to the end user, that's their business. That's how they monetize if they're doing advertising. And so when you look at it in comparison to, I feel like I saw some sort of metric like the last Super Bowl, it was like hundreds of millions in ad revenue for, one event. And so when you look at it in comparison to something like that, spending, a decent amount of money on a tool to give you better visibility, just it's kind of a necessary part of delivering a service. And
So it's not so much that it's that they use it to make decisions that save them money. It's more like it's table stakes, and it'd be irresponsible not to be watching what's going on.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, I do think in real time there are things where if you see an issue, it certainly does, let you make changes, make decisions that could potentially, if you've got some sort of contractual relationship with an advertiser and you need to make sure you stay above 99% delivery or something, you may make a infrastructure change in real time that ensures that stays up. And so it's kind of a part of, it is partly stable stakes, but it's also, giving you the ability to make and react to some of those changes in real time to keep that business relationship healthy.
Hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Now, how have large language models and transformers impacted the way that you guys do your work? Have they at all?
Well, so I mean, we're seeing a lot, like most companies are, just in how we build software. It's definitely um, had an impact. I've seen a lot of varying reactions to it. Some people are all in and they want to just spend 12 hours a day in front of Claude and just, that's where they feel comfortable. Some people are much more cautious and are not ready to just plunge headfirst into like LLM everything. Um, but I mean, it's definitely changing the way we work. I think I think I touched on this just a little bit earlier, but one of the things that we're seeing is, anybody can take Claude and go build, whether it's like an autonomous agent or just some sort of like agentic workflow, you can go pretty quickly and build something that does go and do your grocery shopping for you, or there are a lot of other things. And so we're seeing already a non-trivial amount of agentic traffic. And again, we're sitting with these companies at the edge, where we're kind of where they deliver content to their customers. And so I think we're going to see more and more agentic traffic, which means there's going to be questions about, the good versus bad. There's going to be questions about how do you manage infrastructure costs from agentic traffic. It's, very possible for agents to go a little crazy and spend a bunch of money on infrastructure because they've started requiring a company to scale up. And so I think we're going to start to see more and more of that. And I was chatting with someone else recently, but if you just sort of imagine, let your mind drift off to the future, what will the internet look like when we've got 10 times more bot traffic or agent traffic than human traffic? And that's going to change how we do our work. It's going to change how companies think about, putting stuff out into the world. And so I think it's definitely coming. We're seeing, the early days of it now, but I think it's just going to keep coming.
Hmm. What percentage of traffic out there today is bot traffic versus not bot traffic?
It's a good question. I haven't seen a great number. I think it's my guess is it's probably still quite a bit less than human traffic, but I would say it wouldn't surprise me if it was in, double digit percent. Um, I'd buy anywhere from 5 to 50% of traffic being like, and again, not necessarily all LLMs, but just like, automated processes, bots. But I don't think it's going to be
90 to 95% if you're on it on Twitter, right?
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, certainly some pockets have a lot more than others, but I don't think it's going to be long before we see more agent traffic than human traffic. And
Well, I know, and just in terms of like basic searching behavior, my internet usage has shifted almost entirely to large language models, right? And they even provide citations and stuff, so it's fantastic to be able to just ask a question, get an answer. It's
yep.
it's really great.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's changed a lot. I think I think we're sort of in our own little bubble, where people who are relatively technical are leaning in pretty hard. And I think the majority of the I don't know, populace has not really is not using ChatGPT or Claude on a daily basis, and they're not shifted
Really?
there yet. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, what do you disagree?
I don't know. Everyone I know uses it regularly, but I run in a sort of a secluded circle. Like I don't, I'm
Yeah,
a
I think it's.
social and a little bit introverted, so I don't have a lot of friends.
I mean, when you look at the usage and revenue numbers for OpenAI and Anthropic, it's huge. If you're working in technology, almost certainly you're using it daily. And there are lots of like knowledge work kind of fields where I think it's picking up really quickly. But I think it's still hasn't gotten anywhere near, like, I mean, if you look at how long it took for like Facebook to penetrate the whole world, everyone's got a Facebook account now. It's just like saturated. I don't think we're quite there yet with you know
Yeah, and I'm sure it
ChatGPT.
varies by age as well.
Yeah.
My kids certainly use it. Like they don't even do their homework anymore. They just like draw a Google Lens over it and then send it to Gemini and copy paste the answer.
Yeah, and I mean, we people have talked about this for a long time, but I think we're going to have to just adapt to that being part of how we work, and so things like tests and homework is going to all change. But I think we're still, maybe I'm being naive, but I feel like we're still uh, early for a lot of people. They don't know how. I feel like I've seen enough people that I think should be technical enough for it, and they don't quite yet know how to really use it effectively. And I think once that really kicks in, like you and I are talking, and you're like, "Oh, I'm going to go build an agent that does my grocery shopping for me." I think the majority of people don't yet have that reflex. They don't have the reflex to say, I'm just gonna have Claude do that first. And there's so many tasks that I think it's great use for, but I think we're still a little ways away from that being the majority of people's reaction.
No, you're probably right. Still, I do worry about the future of humanity. I look. My parents could get wherever they needed to go without a map. Like I remember we moved in 1988. We moved to Houston from New Mexico, and I was in the fourth grade. And it took them a month to get real comfortable driving around. But in 1988, nobody had smartphones and you're not going to drive around with an atlas in your car. But seriously, I have no idea how people got around.
Yeah,
Uh,
I still think back even to, when I was I don't know, maybe just in college, printing out MapQuest, and even that to me feels like, wow, I just had to like figure out the turns, and that's even better than what you're describing. Yeah, I don't know.
but I mean, the thing is, like, we've lost the ability to navigate.
Yeah.
But now, what happens when we don't have to think about anything at all? Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm curious. I don't know. We've been thinking a lot about this, at work and broadly, but you know, is this going to take away our critical thinking? Is it going to take away, or is it just going to shift how much of different kinds of thinking and work we do? Are we going to put people out of jobs and have nothing to do, or are we just going to do 10 times more stuff? And I think, the history of society is that we're going to find 10 times more stuff to do. And I have a feeling we're never going to get to a place where we just have everything solved and we can just have idle minds. There's always going to be some new thing to spend our time on. Hopefully it's not, just sitting playing with our iPhones, but we can find something productive to do with our
well, I
mental
mean,
capacity.
I haven't really had much success getting ChatGPT or anything else to come up with something brand new. So what, there's a part of me that thinks that what we know today is all we're ever going to know, because no, the next generation's not going to have to learn all, they're not going to be able to stand on the shoulders of giants and think creatively, because there aren't going to be any giants left. The giant is just ChatGPT that can regurgitate everything that's out on the internet.
Yeah, I think it's certainly I mean, you know, we'll see if we actually get to AGI at one point or another here. But I do feel like it's been interesting to use large language models as as a learning tool, as a way to provide some rigor and some structure. And I think it's we kind of have some opposing factions at work right now, where some folks just want to jump into Claude and figure out what they're going to do by building, and they just want to do it and try it and iterate and do it that way. And then we've got people who are like, well, no, we should know what we're trying to get to before we start building it, because that's how we have a plan. And I think we're going to see those things converge, where LLMs will keep being great at, they don't need to innovate if they can do the repetitive things really quickly and efficiently. And you can still be the human in the loop, saying like, oh, I really like the way that thing worked out. What if we tweak it like this? And you're doing the prompting, you're providing the guidance. But I think it does, and this is kind of where I get to with where I feel like we haven't gotten most people there yet. Is I think if you really start to think about approaching work in that way, it's a great tool to help you think, but you still have to do the thinking, and that's where I think it just shifts the balance of people's work.
It's definitely an iterative process. So what's next in the field of observability? What's the big next problem?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I think we're going to see more changes again as we start to have more agentic traffic. I think there are going to be a lot more interesting, security use cases around agents. Obviously, data volumes are just going to keep growing. We're going to keep finding more and more things that people need to observe year after year. So I think a lot of what we're doing is just focusing on kind of future-proofing the technology, making sure that we've got, years ahead of growth. Our internal processes are changing a lot because of the way LLMs work, and I assume other companies are the same. So I think we're kind of heading into a phase of lots of people building lots of things. Like the cost of code just went to zero. So now I think we're going to see a lot more iteration and experimentation. At the end of the day, you still have to figure out how to build a business, like a viable business, even though, you can just have something coded up for you.
Hmm.
But I think it's just going to be interesting. I think it's going to be really interesting to just sort of see where the shifts are. And, for better or worse, we're going to have our new little agentic buddies out there doing all kinds of stuff, and we're going to need to keep eyes on them too. So I feel like observability for all these agentic workloads is going to matter just as much as it did for everything else.
Now, do you guys do analytics for your customers? Do you take the log data and kind of review it? And
yeah, we do, and we've got an anomaly detection product, and so that's I'm looking for more error type situations. But we've got it built into our dashboards. We've got a lot of things that we pre-compute and calculate and kind of give analytical metrics around performance, and so that's a lot of what we do. We also expose the data so that those customers can get access to it and do their own analysis. We have a MCP server we launched recently, and so if you want to hook your agent up to all this data that we've collected about your CDN workloads, that's something that you can also do. So I think finding more ways to get the data into more formats is something we're also thinking about.
Fascinating. Well, fair warning, I'm going to be hitting you up about Zerg, because I think we could probably do something really interesting there, maybe integrating with your data or something like that. So
yeah, that sounds great. And definitely let me know how your grocery bot turns out.
nice. I definitely will. Sounds good. All right, Todd. Well, it's great meeting you, and I'm excited to kind of do a bit more research on you guys and see where you go in the future. And I really enjoyed our conversation.
That's great. I had fun. Thanks, Greg.
All right, my pleasure. Appreciate it.